Welcome back, everybody, to Strange Planet Podcast. And for this week, I'm going to start off asking you one question. Do you think greed will be the real death of America?
Well, if it's not already on its way, I think that it could be. It's definitely driving a wedge between those that have and those that don't, or at least those that have very little.
Can we take a step back for a second? What do you mean by death of America? Do you mean that America falls apart as a country in terms of society, the government collapsing? What does death look like in America to you?
Yeah, more or less that, or just to the point where, like, I actually think it may have already started, believe it or not, to the point where the wealthy just buy elections, and that's it too. So you're never going to see any major changes.
That would be a collapse of our system of government. There's also, an economic collapse. Can, our country sustain such economic inequality?
Yeah, that's what I'm also leaning towards.
Can people continue to get along in a society where resources are increasingly scarce? Death can look like a lot of things. So I just want to make sure we're, all on the same page as to what that looks like. And that may look like different things, depending on, whether it's social, whether it's political, whether it's economic.
We could take them all one by one because technically it affects all of them. And they all could collapse due to this.
All right. Well, let's take a litmus test of where we are right now.
Right.
Because of greed, we have people who aren't able to survive day to day on just a regular wage. So there has to be either two jobs, or you have to get a job that pays you a decent amount. Even at that point, you're barely making ends meet. And that's just an economic side. Not quite death of America, but definitely worse off than where we were before. Yeah, people are making more money than they were maybe 20, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, but it cost less to get more back then. Like, you could spend, 20 grand for a house?
Yeah, exactly. Everything was very, very differently priced.
That's due to inflation. So wages have not kept up with inflation. So while it looks on paper like people are making more, they're actually not making more. They're probably making less because inflation has gone up every year. Now, inflation has happened for a long time, but we've recently had issues where the inflation has risen more than its historical average rate of increase, which it should be like 1 or 2%. It's well above that now.
Well, if we're looking at this model continuing its upward slope, it's going to reach a dystopian point. I will say, I don't know if you guys agree with me, but I do think that, it'll eventually get to a point where people are like homeless. Working 7 days a week, homeless.
And it's not enough. Yeah, and it's not enough. Go figure. Like, that's insane.
Without any other intervening circumstances, that could be the case. There could be events that are unforeseen that could affect that, both positively and negatively. We never foresaw the COVID crisis that happened that sort of exacerbated economic issues that we were already having, also exacerbated social and political issues, because you had situations where conservatives were saying, fuck the government and the mask mandates and everything like that. And you had liberals saying, just wear a fucking mask, be a decent human being. And so COVID just further accelerated those social divisions. If COVID never happened, we wouldn't have that type of sort of hot button issue for people to argue over. We probably would have had other things, but I think that was sort of a boiling point in this country. And so when you say greed, greed is one of the driving factors in terms of stress on our social, political, and economic systems. But then there's also, that underlying division in society that I think is the main driver of the danger to our society. And yes, I think greed exacerbates it, but I think that social divisions are even more of a determining factor in terms of whether our society will survive or not, whether this country will survive or not.
Suppose that's true too. But let's be real about one thing. There's no reason why we should even have billionaires. That's a ridiculous amount of money. And you can't even spend all that in your own lifetime if you wanted to. You know what I mean? That's insanity. And then these people, are they even paying their fair share in taxes? Do we even know that? Is that even a thing?
Okay, but that's not even, I mean, you can sit here and complain about the fact that there are billionaires, but there's, that's not really what's keeping people from, earning decent wages, or, there's definitely, there have been billionaires before. There, people with exorbitant amounts of money. It's just that our society currently isn't structured to either tax the wealthy. Those sources of income that the wealthy have are sort of baked in and insulated from taxation. And so we also have an increase in the need of services in society. So, health. People, 100 years ago didn't have as many expectations in terms of their health. People, you got sick, I don't know, they fucking let you bleed. George Washington died of bloodletting. They cut him because they thought that would, that was the way to get the disease out. But we have massively increased expectations in terms of medications and things to keep people healthy.
You can afford it.
And so our expectations of what we want in terms of what we can have as humanity and living in a society, that increases the demands on, how we spend our resources as a population. And so we don't have a structure in place that takes more of those resources that are generated by society and puts them toward those expectations. And I think, thinking about it like that instead of, oh, these billionaires and millionaires, yeah, sure. But, you can put a cap on how much people can earn or whatever. I don't think that's really a viable solution because, yeah, I think we should have a higher graduated system of taxation, but I don't think there should be billionaires. There should be massive rewards for people who know how to provide society with the most highly in demand products, and especially in a global competitive marketplace, rewarding people who, come up with systems of inventing and delivering life-changing products and services, I think is important. But there should also be a system in place that allocates resources that are generated to the population and meets those increased expectations of humanity.
I'm not necessarily pinpointing or calling out billionaires, but what I will say is this. If they are billionaires and they're allowed to pay their employees minimum wage just to get by, that's a problem because they are clearly making more than enough money to pay all their employees a livable wage, and they're not, and there's nothing enforcing them to do so. When Amazon first came out, they were their workers were living in the parking lot out of their cars, some of them. You know what I mean? It wasn't until Bernie Sanders got in there and was able to restructure it a little bit better for some of those people. But that's where my problem is when you have the owner at the top of the, pyramid or whatnot, and he's paying his entire employees nothing, no health benefits, no paid time off, no vacation time, and then that's just legal and okay. And that's where my bone to pick is.
All right. Well, the situation I'm seeing here is that there are several factors that are contributing to this. First thing is the main one is the cost of living. That keeps going up based on inflation on, house goods, and utilities. I guess getting involved with that because, like Brooke was talking about, you have to have the resources to keep the people going. And the lack of living space is what's causing rent and prices to go up as well. But it's at a ridiculous point where it's just like you have almost no choice but to live in your car because it's, what you need to get to work back and forth, even though it's a goddamn luxury, not a necessity. We have to have a structured system to not necessarily provide, because then you're going to get those who don't do anything to society and just free ride, and you don't want that. You
can't do that, yeah.
But a system in place that helps those build to the, to get to that level, whether it's, it's going to have to deal with education and knowledge of, the systems of taxes and stuff. There are things they don't teach in school that they need to teach in school.
Oh, yeah.
And these are, life skills that you need to get into the situation where you can better your life to make more money and get to a point where you're comfortable and plan for your future. And I think there's too much distraction in life that draws us away from what's really important. I think the earliest part of our years in life is the point in time where we should have done more. But you're growing up and you see all this shit and you get all these, these stars talking about, oh, this, you need all this cool stuff. You need to do all this cool stuff. You need to be all this cool stuff. The social media with Instagram, oh, look what I'm doing. I'm out in Bosnia having a cocktail or whatever country you want to talk about. Anyway, but it's the point of distraction. And there needs to be some kind of way we can teach our people, meaning Americans, those in this country who, want to better themselves, to focus that energy into pushing forward. I mean, yes, greed is big on this because those who want more and they keep wanting more and end up getting bigger parts of the pie. And it kind of pushes that scale more on their favor. And if they just were more modest about stuff, maybe not making a 200%, profit margin that year, be like, all right, we made 200% profit margin. Let's take 100%, half of that, and give it back to those who helped us get to the 200% profit margin.
That'll never happen.
But that's a morality thing. That's not necessarily an economic legal thing. They can do whatever the fuck they want. And while it would be a interesting and maybe good idea, maybe bad idea to have a cap on how much you can get paid, the double edge of that is, depending on what job it is, you should only get paid a certain amount to do that specific job.
I'm actually, this is going to sound funny, but I'm actually kind of against the overall total cap. But I think at a certain point, they should be required to pay their employees a specific amount more if they're in the millionaire or even billionaire, class.
But they don't have to. Well, all right. Here's the thing also. Investments, the stock market. Good idea, but compounds the problem severely. There needs to be some kind of a push and pull where, those who invest get back a certain amount and then should be like, okay, that's where you get cut off. So much money is spent trying to make the black, to make investors happy. Meanwhile, the companies are going under, and the workers who are trying just to make ends meet with their jobs, it's like the money's going too far in one direction and it's sucking the life out of the company.
Would you say that the economy we have now works for all?
No.
Absolutely not. I agree to that. And it's been that way for a while. It's not new.
It doesn't work for all. There are poor people
Right. And I hate to say it, the way things are looking, that's not going to change either.
An economy will never work for all. We'll never have a perfect system. That I don't think is a fair standard to hold us to. Should we strive to be perfect? Of course, but it's never going to be perfect. Another thing, like we talked about, investments. So a lot of trying to ensure that employees are paid above minimum wage or whatever. If they, a lot of the billionaire class isn't necessarily the business ownership class. They can be, but they can also be the investment class, which they don't even fucking need to run companies per se. They don't need to make the hiring decisions. They just own shares in companies or own different financial products that have no direct ownership of even corporations. When you get up into that class of people, they really don't have any direct influence, at least in their capacity in which they make their millions and billions. They don't even have the direct capacity to hire or fire people and at a certain rate.
I'm actually kind of glad you brought the stock market up for a second there, because like the talk of the town always is, oh, well, stock market's doing great. And like, yeah, be that as it may, it's probably a good thing. But I don't think people realize that the stock market is no depiction of actually how the citizens are doing. It's definitely not.
It's a depiction of how the companies are doing.
Yeah, it's like the companies could be thriving, doing great, but the people could be suffering. You know what I mean? Like,
the stock market's not even necessarily how companies are doing, because stocks are, their ownership of companies, but they're also like sort of predictions in terms of how companies will do, or
what's to come.
It's not even an accurate assessment of the value of a company. It's what do people think the value of the company is, given all types of predictions and conditions. So like people who invest in stocks are speculating, and that portion of the value, that speculation, is, just subject to fluctuations based on people's sentiments, people's beliefs about what is happening and what can happen. And some of those beliefs may be rational. Some of them may be irrational as fuck.
But it definitely is no depiction on how society is actually doing. I don't think people really realize that.
Well, it's connected, because if the stock market is tanking, like, no one's doing well.
Right, but people could still be doing terribly and suffering while the stock market is thriving.
That is also true.
Yeah, and that's the way I feel like it's kind of been these past 8-9 years or so. You know what I mean? Like, the prices have not been really coming down too much. Surprisingly, gas has been a little bit lower than usual. I will say that, but
I'm just saying, like, I don't think anyone really says that the stock market is a stand-in for how, Main Street is doing. No one says that Wall Street is Main Street, but if Wall Street's doing bad, then Main Street is definitely not doing well.
Right. And if they're not doing well, then forget about everybody else. So,
so how do you take care of all your citizens when there's not enough to go around?
You need a more fair system, and don't expect it. But like, that's really what I think it boils down to.
What it boils down to is our system currently is fair. I mean,
is it?
It's lopsided because the math works after you get to a certain point where it just gets ridiculous. But it's maybe if you trim the fat, if we trim all the bullshit that we don't need. I'm talking about it's the overabundance of luxury that just doesn't work. Maybe if we have better quality products that could help lower things down, because maybe they wouldn't cost so much. I don't know. It's just, it feels like it's getting to a point where there's no way it's going to get fixed. It's just going to keep getting worse and worse.
Yeah, that's what I was
trying to make more and more money.
In this whole episode, that's what I was getting at, because I feel like if something isn't done soon, it's going to go really bad at some point, and then something will have to be done. You know what I mean? So this was more of like a preliminary kind of like, discussion in a sense. And, seeing greed on the table as it is, and how they want to obviously take and reap as much as they can get without having to pay any at all, or pay as little as possible. I just feel like to a certain bracket, there should be a point where they have to, depending upon the business, depending upon what's going on. But I feel like if you're a multi-billionaire, it shouldn't be legal for you to pay your employees like dirt wages just to get by. That's insanity. You know what I mean? Because clearly you have more than enough money to do it. You know what I mean? Like that's especially when you have like thousands of employees that are making $15 an hour. That's not a livable wage. You know what I mean? Like not anymore, at least. Definitely isn't. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm getting at.
Again, it comes to the cost of living. It comes down to how much do you pay for rent, or how much can you pay for rent without having to move fucking 2 hours from where you live right now.
Yeah, or another state.
Yeah, I mean,
I just feel like it could be better.
Rent should not be as high as it is right now.
And there's no rent cap. Yeah, so basically they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, but it for some people it comes down to the cost of utilities, and there are some places that are losing money. It's weird. Electric's too high.
Everything is, relatively in the upper brackets. Because if you realize even right now, the way things kind of are, there's probably a bunch of Americans that have their car probably in better insurance than themselves. You know what I mean? Their car has better coverage than themselves. And I feel like that's another major problem. You know what I mean? Like that shouldn't be a thing. That once again, we're the greatest country in the world, right? Why can't we provide health care for our citizens? Can't do that either, I guess, right? There's a bunch that want to, but good luck with the Republicans getting that one done.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So, like, I feel like this country could be so much more than it is, but if we keep it the route we're at, we're never going to see it. At least not in my lifetime.
Something has to give.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, there has to be, whether it's something passed or whether there's a new system or just something. Because, like, all I see is people struggling and they got 2 or 3 jobs apiece. You know what I mean? And, like, that's not living. That's just working your entire life away. And then eventually, what are you going to do? You're going to retire at 60. Maybe if you're lucky, you'll get your Social Security. And then what? 10 years, 15 years later, you're probably dead. So that's the American life right now. Think about it. That's really what it is. And that shouldn't be the case. It really shouldn't. I mean, I'm not speaking technically for as a whole, because there are some jobs out there where the employers actually do take care of their employees. I feel like those are the companies that you probably see thriving longer because of that. You know what I mean? If they're well taken care of, the employees are well taken care of, they're going to take care of you too. You know what I mean? If you're going to pay your employees, shit wages, and then you find yourself fluctuating employees every, 2 to 3 weeks, that's probably the reason why, like, you know what I mean? But there's nothing telling these people what to do. So it's like a free for all in the end.
Well, look, here's another pressure that's added. So when you talk about corporations and you talk about paying employees, in one sense, employees in a competitive capitalist society, they have to be viewed as resources or inputs into a function that produces profit. Okay. So if one company pays employees $15 an hour and another pays them $16, which company on its face would be good to invest in?
The one that pays 15.
Right.
They'll end up making more money in the end of the year.
Right. But you would think working for the 16 one would be better.
So the company whose CEO decides we're going to pay $15 an hour to our employees, for every employee, they're making $1 more. Now, say they have, 1,000 employees, that's saving $1,000 an hour times however many hours they work. So that's can be a significant sum of money. And if you were to invest your money, if you were to say, you buy a stock for like $100 or something, right? You invest your $100 which company do you think people are going to invest in? Well, on its face, you would think other people are going to invest and drive up the price of the stock of the company that pays their employees less. And in a competitive market, companies that, produce more profit one way or the other, they can sell better products, they can put more money in marketing that is an expense, but then maybe they get more on the other end. That's a risk. But there's also an argument to be made that investing in employees can produce more profit over the long term. Maybe there's more productivity from workers who are paid more. Maybe there's better retention. So and companies that require workers who are more highly skilled, retention builds those skills over time, and you'll have a better synergies that exist from employees who work there for multiple years. But in a market that depends on quarterly profits and reports, it's very hard to, as an investor, make an investment in a company that's not looking at that next quarterly report and how they show profits and increased profits, because it's not just enough to be a profitable company. You have to increase your profits over last quarter.
Of course. Leading to my greed again, but of course.
Look, no.
Right. So I see several problems so far, but keep going.
Hold on. It's not about greed. You invest $100, right, in a company that's profitable, right? Now, in order for your $100 to grow, other people have to see an increase in profits, because otherwise the value is just going to stay the same. The company's not doing anything to increase its profits. Well, the value is just going to stay the same. So your $100 stays at $100. You don't make any more. So companies are under tremendous pressure to show that they are going to increase profits one way or the other, whether that's like cutting employees, like firing them, or and making others work harder to pick up the slack, or whether that's paying employees less, or whether that's, downsizing products to...
None of that sounds appeasing to the worker, maybe to the investor.
Okay, but to the investor, you need to grow profit somehow, because your $100 that you invest needs to grow.
So by the company firing people, costing them their possible mortgages and rents and everything else, they'll be willing to do that just to keep the investors happy.
Right. Just to keep their investors happy.
You don't think there's something wrong with that?
Hold on. And if the investors aren't happy, guess whose job is on the line? The CEO. The investors and the board. The investors and the board, who's, they're responsible to, those shareholders.
So basically,
investors.
Right. So basically,
like the annual meeting, if they don't see their profits going up, goodbye CEO. So there's like a whole circular kind of chain going on where CEOs of companies, they sort of need to make these decisions that suck for employees or potential employees of the companies, suck for consumers, but are beneficial for investors. Otherwise, you know what? Investors will take their money and invest elsewhere, or they'll get that CEO replaced with someone who will implement those things to make the company more profitable. That's the kind of situation that our country is in, and that sort of cycle is definitely coming to a head.
Right. So you figure in that case, the workers are the guinea pigs.
Okay. I think that it should take into account, for the value of a company, the not necessarily happiness of their workers, but the quality of life that their workers have who've been there 1, 2, 3, 4 years. Like if a guy's been working for a company for 4 years, he should be stable. Hey, I've been working for this company for 4 years. I make this amount of money.
Right.
And I should be
You would
stable
think
at this point.
You would think there'd be like a ladder system or something. Maybe you would hope at the fourth year he's not making the same amount he was on year one.
Well,
right?
the problem with everything is that raises don't keep going.
Never do.
You get a raise at a certain point, and then maybe in a couple of years you get another raise, and if you're lucky, maybe 4 or 5 years down on you get another raise. But that doesn't keep up with the cost of living. So that's one thing that maybe should be taken into account when valuing a company. Are their employees, quality employees? Get the job done, get paid well enough for their job, and live a decent life. But that not necessarily has to do with anything dealing with a capitalistic country that we live in. Let me ask you this, Rook. If a company makes $10 million in the year, but due to overhead of their employees, they're in the black maybe $1,000. Does that make them a profitable company or not? They made $10 million in the year.
So $10 million revenue, but they also have expenses that only leave them with how much?
$1,000.
Right. So that is a profitable company. However, a company that nets them, say, $100,000, that is going to be a more profitable investment. Like if I told you, hey, give me $100, I can turn your $100 into $200 next week, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or I can turn your $100 into $101 next week. Now, both carry risks. It's not guaranteed. It's an investment, right? But all things being equal, like let's say, would you rather make $200 or $101 off a $100 investment? Would you rather make would you rather make $1 or would you rather make double your money and make another 100?
Obviously, you'd go for the double because what is an extra buck going to do?
Right. So
obviously, anyone would say the $100, but you're saying that money has to come out of their black?
Yes, it has to come out of, because the company has to be profitable. If it's not profitable, then people aren't going to want to invest in that company because those stocks that are going to be worth less money, because that means that there's going to be no dividends because you have to have profits to have dividends, or you have to have some money to give away to shareholders. Now, in a more modern sense, like companies don't even really have to give away dividends because stocks are more or less traded based upon, the value of the stock. So you don't necessarily have to have dividends. But in theory, and this is how people trade, a company that, makes more profit is going to be invested in more because people will buy it. You have to be able to sell your investment at a higher price than what you paid for it.
Yeah,
and the company that makes the moves that, bottom line, get them the increased profit are the ones that people are going to invest in.
Okay, let me put this scenario to you. Say you have two companies that sell the same type of product. One company uses cheap labor and cheap materials and sells 10,000 units, makes maybe 1.5 million.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And then we get the other company who sells, again, similar products, but, pays their employees a decent wage, uses quality materials, makes a better product. But though they don't make the $1.5 million in the black, they sell 20,000 units and they get maybe $800,000 in the black. Now, would you say because the cheap guys made more money, they're more profitable? Or would you say that the one that had the quality product is more profitable?
By definition, more profitable.
Mm.
So making cheap products and with cheap labor may have long-term effects, but if you're asking whether you're going to invest in a company on a quarterly basis, whether this company is going to make more profits by the end of the next fiscal quarter, you're going to invest in the company that will get you your $100 to, let's just make it simple. You want to get your $100 to make $100 rather than $1.
Yeah, to double it, say. Yeah, I see what you're saying now.
Yeah, but that for me that encourages too much of like
cheap labor.
underhanded method. Yeah, it makes it so it's
It explains what happens, what's actually happening. And if you can understand if I were to say, give me your $100 and I will put it in one of two companies, and one of the companies is making moves that is going to make you $100, and the other company is making moves that make you $1. It doesn't matter what the moves are, especially on a short basis. Like,
so you don't actually make money until you sell your stock, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it's speculative until the point of when you sell it at what you sell it for.
And Uncle Sam will come and collect. And you
Obviously.
sell stuff.
Because we sailed away from the British to tax ourselves later on in life.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the scenario. The craziest part about it, though, is that's what, like he said, it's leading to problems today. All that model does is encourage cheap labor and cheap products, and then we wonder why nobody wants to buy American.
Right. There's a limit to cheap labor and cheap products. So cheap products, for instance, like a company is not going to be profitable if it sells cheap products that, are so cheap and crappy that they break and then no one buys them. They develop a reputation that these products aren't, worth buying. So there is a limit to that. In terms of cheap labor, there's a limit in that, you can't, well, since there are minimum wage laws, that actually kind of presents a little bit of a problem, because you could just say the minimum wage federally, I think, is $7.25 an hour. So like a job that pays $7.25 an hour, well, you can't do it in New York, but let's just say whatever state that doesn't enforce or support the federal minimum wage, or actually, excuse me, all states have to support the federal minimum wage, but let's say it's not substantially above that. Let's say it's like $8 an hour or something. And $8 an hour in that state is nowhere near the what it takes to meet the cost of living in that state or that area of that state in which the person lives, right? No one is going to go take the job that offers $8 an hour because they can't live on it.
Right, right.
So there is, at least some pressure for companies to pay a living wage. Minimum wage actually artificially tells them, that this is a living wage, when in fact, oftentimes, especially, in places like New York, it's really not. So, I'm not saying that minimum wage is a bad thing. What I'm saying is that minimum wage needs to be honest about what, the actual cost of living is. And, it may be nice to have a nice round figure on it, but really it's dependent on where you live and a variety of factors that are frankly complex and don't really bode themselves well to political consensus. There are opponents of minimum wage who say, oh, raising it to $15 an hour federally is too much. It's too much for some states or some areas, and it will bankrupt businesses or whatever. I don't know that that's the case now, especially that inflation has risen so much. I think that maybe $15 an hour at the federal level, nationwide, anywhere you go, $15 an hour would probably not be too much. And even if it is, like, places will adjust. Like, you'll adjust, people will make more money, they'll make $15 an hour, and in exchange, they'll be able to spend more in those places. It all adjusts, it all, equals out. Now, what the problem is that investments have already been made at, that lower level. So some people are going to get screwed. But, I think anytime you increase the minimum wage, it's all going to balance out. And they're still going to be struggling. And, I don't think that's, the silver bullet to anything.
No, but I feel like it is a step in the right direction, because like you just said, $15 an hour, right? Say you're working full time on $15 an hour. So it's 40 hours a week at $15 an hour. That only gives you $600 for the week, before taxes, more or less. So there are people that are spending $2,000 on rent. You realize that's the first 3 weeks of every month is going straight to rent. That's not enough to live.
Yeah. Rent should only be a third of your income.
Yeah,
monthly.
see, that's where my issue is. You shouldn't be spending 3 weeks. There's usually only 4 weeks in a month. You shouldn't be spending 3 weeks of your month just to keep the roof over your head. There's still food, there's still utilities, there's car, there's insurance, health insurance. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how you motherfuckers do it in this country anymore. You know what I mean? And the worst part about the renting aspect is you don't even own it. Like, if it was a mortgage and you're spending $2,500 a month, at least you get to keep the motherfucker after 30 years. In this country, if you're renting, you realize you're just throwing all that away, more or less. Like, that's where my problem is. If you're making at least $20 an hour, that is a much more livable wage. And even so, you're probably still putting damn near 2 weeks of every month into just the roof over your head. You know what I mean? So, like, there's a lot of people that go to college and they get a job. And guess what? That job doesn't start off very well. So how do you even incorporate student loans into that mix now? You know what I mean? God. You can't. Yeah. You can't. Like, that's where my problem is when it comes down to all this. Sure, we could talk about the investors and the businesses, but if the people aren't getting paid, how are they going to get their bills paid? How is the economy ever going to really strive if the people that need it most don't have it? You know what I mean? Like, that's where my issue is, because everybody knows a really well-funded and powered country is a well-funded middle class. We don't have that here. We hardly even have a middle class anymore. We have poor and we have filthy rich. That's it. You know what I mean? So we could talk all for days about investing and all this shit, but that doesn't help anybody's life, really. And some of that has even got a slight gambling aspect to it. So, like, that's just where I stand on this whole situation. Nobody should be spending 75% of every month just to keep the roof over their head.
All right. Well, maybe there shouldn't be like a federal minimum wage. Maybe there should be a state by state reported minimum like living wage. Like this year in New York, around the city, and then the rest of the state would be like, something else. But like, this is what if you're in the city, this is what the minimum amount of money you should make in order to live here comfortably, or barely floating.
I almost think scratch that. I almost think we should kind of do what we did more or less in the 70s. Minimum wage seemed to keep everything fine then. You could live it wasn't like luxurious, of course.
No, but
you could at least afford the roof over your head. You know what I mean? Like in 1 week.
at least if it's reported, like, hey, you should be making this amount of money to have a livable wage in these areas. Maybe that would encourage those areas to pay those wages. I mean, if you make it mandatory, it's going to make other areas suffer. I see where Rook's coming from. Like in the middle of the country where, there's not that many cities, you get small towns and stuff, a minimum wage of $15, $20 will fucking kill companies out there because they don't even make that kind of a money. So maybe like,
that's fair.
In Tennessee, $12.50 should be the minimum wage there. Suggested, not that it, is going to be the federal or state minimum wage, but like, hey, this is suggested what we have in the state based on numbers we ran from the rent, cost of food, cost of utilities in that area, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And maybe other areas.
I was going to say, like, I just looked it up. So adjusted for inflation, and adjusted to, in 2023 dollars, the minimum wage in 1970, adjusted for inflation, or it was $1.60, and it's $12.04 an hour in 2023 dollars.
That still seems too low.
That was the minimum wage in
the 70s.
In the 70s. Now you could throw in what was the rent then? I doubt it was $2,000 a month. I bet you it was $400, maybe $400 or $500 would be my guess.
No, probably be less.
Maybe less. Yeah. See the difference there too?
Right. No. We're adjusting for 2023 dollars. So
Still, $12.60 seems kind of low for a livable wage.
Because it is.
You'd
Because
have to be working like fucking 50 hours a week to like
barely get by.
barely get by. Yeah, seriously.
Well, that was the minimum wage back then. So
But
might have
rent wasn't the same as what it was back then either.
Right, but
substantially went up.
We're adjusting everything for 2020
Inflation.
for inflation. So $12 an hour is inflation adjusted.
So the dollar was worth more back in the 70s.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's seems like every passing year becomes less and less.
Yes.
But,
that's by design.
Yeah, that does seem very true too. But that's what I'm saying. If you're adjusting that, you also have to include the average rent then compared to now. And if we're saying the average rent then was $400, $300, right now your average is about $2,000. That's a pretty big substantial difference there. And $12 ain't gonna cut it.
Right, but there was less home ownership, I think.
But there was more of it because houses were more affordable. Houses were 30, 40 grand. Now they're 400 grand. Well, at least in New York, but
right. People also make more money in terms of inflation.
Yeah, but not enough.
You're not going to be able to get. Yeah, you're not going to be able to get a house on $14, $12 an hour.
And the bank will laugh at you. You weren't able to get a house on minimum wage back in the 70s either.
Are you sure?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that I don't know about that because
minimum wage in the 70s would get you a house. Fuck no.
Well, I know for a fact that if you were like a barber or like a bartender,
right.
They used to
minimum
give
wage minimum wage wasn't what it was back then for now because people didn't view minimum wage as what you should get paid. People would work, maybe start at minimum wage after their first 6 months, get paid more. They'd get constant raises. We don't get that now.
Exactly.
We don't get those constant raises. So you're working from a minimum wage, which may be working for you at that moment, but 6 months, a year, 2 years down the line, you're still making that same money. You're not, minimum wage anymore. You're lower.
Right. And you're going backward, still making the same money. Exactly. That's what I'm saying there too. Because like, regardless to where you work, if there's no ladder or step system to allow you to, expand on that,
right?
You're basically working for nothing.
Prices have definitely increased, but it's not to the extent that you might think in terms of like if you were making minimum wage in the 70s, you weren't necessarily able to afford a house.
I mean, it wouldn't be recommended, but I feel like then your chances would be better than it is now.
Sure.
Yeah, it would be better than it is now, I think. And the price of the house, of course, would be fundamentally a lot less than it is now. You know what I mean? Yeah, houses in New York are anywhere from 300 to 500, and it's not even like it's that great of a place either, Of course, you could go to Atlanta and get a place for 200, and it'll be a mansion, but who wants to do that? No pun intended that anybody lives there. But you know what I mean? Like, I don't really have the means to do such a thing, even if I wanted to, per se. You know what I mean? I doubt many other people do too, depending upon where you live and how far away you are. You know what I mean? But it shouldn't be this clusterfucked. You know what I mean? But they don't care. So I guess in closing here, what do we propose might be a possible solution to this?
Thanos, snap his finger.
It probably would, realistically, too. It probably would make the planet.
Mathematically, yes. It would make everything more available for people. However, there wouldn't be as many people doing those jobs. So,
right,
it would be good and bad at the same time.
The most plausible solution that I would see is something with AI.
That I feel like is going to just jeopardize it and make it worse. That's going to lead to another whole conversation because that's replacing people's jobs. And it's only a matter of time before that gets enhanced and starts taking more people's jobs.
Yeah, but you're thinking in terms of jobs when it might obviate the need for jobs to begin with.
I mean, in certain cases it could, but that's not what it's being used for already. They already have a McDonald's in Texas that is entirely run by robots and AI. There's not one human person that works in there. So, I don't know. It seems like they're going the other way there.
humanity.
You know what I mean? So that's only one example. Give it another 10 years, every Walmart, every restaurant, every,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Right,
There will
but
be
if-
no humans. It'll be all robots and AIs.
But if AI could harvest and generate the resources that we need to survive without human effort or labor, then and they could provide that to humanity at no cost or no additional cost other than the cost of setting up those AI systems
That
and
would,
robotics,
yeah,
then that would be beneficial to humanity.
It
that
would,
would lower
but
costs.
it would be
No,
only a
no.
matter of time that whoever owns that is going to charge the shit out of it. You know
Who's
what I mean?
to say? All right, let me ask you this, Steve.
You're-
Uh,
And
Gee.
that's a possible.
what if they made it like an investment? You bought a robot. Your robot works somewhere and makes you money.
That would be interesting, I suppose.
They
It
go in
doesn't
for
seem-
daily, like, checkups and stuff.
Doesn't seem feasible, but I suppose it is possible. Not in a near future, but
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's definitely something that's different. But like, hey, I invested in a robot. Now he gets to work for me and do a job that I would normally have to do, but he can do it perfectly and make money while I do nothing, or why I try to invest in a second robot to make me
yeah,
more
why
money.
you do another job because you need two to get by. You know.
Well, even that, even if you you keep investing in robots, after a while you have robots working 3 or 4 jobs.
Yeah, I mean, if you can afford them, who says that these robots are going to be cheap? That's another thing too, Like I highly doubt these robots are going to be $300. You know what I mean?
There's going to be factory jobs for them. It's going to come down to it's going to come down what the Simpsons predicted. You're going to need to learn how to maintain and build these robots. So get started.
Yeah, no, that's yeah. You're going to see a lot of jobs maybe in that situation in maintenance and construction.
I can see how AI can help you self-teach you new skills, which could lower the cost of education. I can see how AI can assist you in doing certain things, like, maybe you have a headset with a camera and you're working on a heater as a plumber, or you're a circuit as an electrician, looking at something you haven't seen before. And you go, hey, AI, or whatever you call your thing, what is that? And it takes a photo of it, and kind of analyzes over the internet, and gives you all these options, like, oh, this is this and that, and it's from this time, it's discontinued, or
It could be, yeah, but that would have to be really thoroughly, finished.
yeah,
Can't half-ass something
we're
like
talking
that.
future times, not tomorrow.
Yeah, oh yeah, and that's not any time too soon either, that's for sure. And that's all we got for this week, everyone. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit the bell icon for notifications. Strange Planet will have new episodes on YouTube every Friday. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.